December is going to be an exciting and wild month for the Louisville football program.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making this your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started. December is going to be a wild and exciting month for the Louisville football program as they navigate the offseason, the transfer portal, getting ready for the Sun Bowl. So much going on. Louisville picked up their first portal commitment on Tuesday afternoon, Purdue offensive lineman Mahamane Moussa. They have 3 players visiting over Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll discuss those players coming up in the second segment, and then we'll wrap the show up by diving into the weekly mailbag questions. So there is a lot going on, right? And that's something that we mentioned yesterday. I gave you all my promise and guarantee that I was going to do my very best to keep you all as informed and in the know as I possibly could. Because we know that when the portal rolls around, when portal season rolls around, things get hectic. And that's for all programs across the country. And then if you are a fan of the University of Louisville, things get even more crazy because of Jeff Brohm's tactics to utilize the portal to do the majority of his recruiting on a year-in, year-out basis. And we talk about that. Maybe that's not going to be the case every year, but for the first 3 off seasons, it has been or is going to be like that. So this is going to be a wild, wild month for Louisville. What I would say is to just do your best to not go crazy because we're only 2 days into the underclassmen portal window opening, and I'm already, my head is spinning from all the players that are either interested in the Cardinals or Louisville has reached out to, or, hey, take a look at this guy, or, hey, Louisville should go after this guy. And I'm like, I do not envy the coaching staff whatsoever for their jobs, for what they're going to have to do over the next couple of weeks, maybe even couple of months. So as exciting as this is, we kind of need to break it down. Who should you be focused on? Like, when is the recruitment serious enough to focus on for Louisville? Well, there's really one thing that we've seen that is a parallel between the first and second offseason, and it's already showing in the third offseason with Jeff Brohm. The players that visit Louisville over this next month are automatically, by default, the players to focus on. Not every player that visits commits, but if you go back and look at the success rates that the Cardinals, the success rates in which Louisville has gotten a commitment from a player that they've hosted on a visit, I would venture into saying that success rate, that closing rate is fairly high. And it's been that way over the past 2 off seasons. We've already seen it. It's 50% successful as we speak because one of the 2 players that we talked about visiting on Monday, he's already committed. The other one, we don't know. So we'll have to just wait and see. I've had some people ask, well, who should I be focusing on? I'm human too. Trying to keep up with all of this is going to be very difficult. What I would recommend is to, and this might not always be the case, but watch and see who Louisville brings in on a visit. Because I can tell you one thing with certainty in this portal window. Number one, Louisville is not going to waste time and resources on bringing a player in if they don't feel like they have a good chance of landing that player. They already have a good idea. Like, if they're hosting a player on a visit in the portal window, there's a good chance that that player is going to come to Louisville. Maybe they don't. Maybe Louisville opts to go in a different direction. But Louisville has a ton of spots, not a lot of time to fill them. So that's the other thing. I combine them into two. You're not going to waste resources on doing that. Number two, you're not going to waste the time because a lot of teams across the country are looking to fill their respective spots. And Louisville is sort of at they're in a good and a bad spot at the same time. Like, they're in a good spot because you have the scholarships to be able to offer, you have the NIL money to offer, and you've got the playing time to offer. But they're also in a little bit of a bad spot because they have more spots to fill to where they can't be as selective with some of these spots as different universities can be. Like, say at universities, I only need to fill 7 to 10 spots. And as it relates to Louisville, and you're talking about over 20, 25, maybe even 30. So I look at this, and that will be my recommendation. It's going to be a wild month. You're going to see a lot of players visit. You're going to hear about a lot of commitments. One thing that we're going to do on this show is we're going to stay in the moment to an extent, because it's very easy to get confused and to sort of go over the same recruitment. So we're going to try to stay as in the moment, in the present as we can with visitors. Like Monday's show, we talked about the players that were visiting Monday. Tuesday's show, players that are visiting Tuesday and Wednesday. On tomorrow's show, it's going to be about players that are visiting Thursday, and then continuing on. And that's not always going to be the rubric or the criteria, but that's how, in a perfect world, that's how we're going to operate. Now, I said to an extent for a reason. There are going to be some high-level prospects that Louisville is going to potentially be involved with, like Miller Moss, who is going to be on campus this week. He's the guy that we talked about last week for good reason. He is a high-profile transfer, and Louisville needs a QB1, and the quarterback position is going to be one that we look at. And if there's a top player at their position entering the portal and visiting Louisville, then it's going to get more attention than some other recruitments, and that's just the way it goes. But like I said, focus on who visits. It's very simple. If you tuned into yesterday's show on Monday, then you heard me discuss this prospect a little bit. And if you haven't, that's okay. It's still up if you want to go take a look at it, but appreciate you all joining in anyway. One of the players that visited on Monday, Mahamane Moussa, Purdue offensive lineman, has announced his commitment to the University of Louisville. He becomes the first portal commitment for the Cardinals. Moussa has played multiple years at the Power 5 level with Purdue, right? So Jeff Brohm recruited him out of high school. He played under Brohm for a season. I believe he played at left tackle that year. Now, that's where this gets a little interesting, is that he played at left tackle under Brohm, but this past year was mainly playing at left guard. So I know that there's some discussion as to, well, what position does he project to have the most success at the NFL level? And it seems like on the interior might be the answer to that. But I'm not sure what your thoughts are on Pro Football Focus, but according to PFF, he was the lowest rated starting offensive lineman for Purdue this year. I think that there is a concern about the lateral quickness, but again, there's two things here. Number one, I think that Pro Football Focus is a decent guide to understanding analytics, but it also is misleading. Like, there's been multiple times, and I'm no football extraordinaire. Like, I'm not like this bright football mind. I like to think I have a decent amount of football knowledge, but I'm not, a coach. There's been times where I've watched a game and had, an assessment of a player or a position group, and I've looked at Pro Football Focus, and the rating has been completely different than what I've said. And I'm like, man, it's been like a lot of times that's happened. So I take everything that PFF says with a grain of salt. There's also this aspect of it, and this is the more comforting one, is that Jeff Brohm and Richard Owens have done a great job at recruiting the offensive line. Now, last year, it looked like there was going to be some issues with the offensive line early on. It was definitely a struggle, but they picked it. They picked it up. They picked things up. and they played really well towards the end of the year to the point where they only allowed 15 total sacks in 12 regular season games, and they looked really good opening up the run. So at this point, I think that Moussa is a rotational player that fills a depth need, but if he plays a significant amount, I'm going to trust Jeff Brohm and Richard Owens because they've shown me over 2 portal off seasons that they can recruit the offensive line really well. So that is one portion of this team that I think is going to get some attention. There is a player that we're going to talk about here in just a second that is an offensive lineman that is visiting on Wednesday. There is one player visiting Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday currently. We'll discuss who those 3 players are coming up on the next segment of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, if you go to FanDuel.com right now, America's #1 sportsbook, you'll see that Louisville has opened up as the favorite over Washington in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl on New Year's Eve. FanDuel is my go-to spot for all of my big-time earnings. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives me everything I need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Right now, if you're new, you can place a $5 bet and get $150 in bonus bets if you win just by visiting FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started, once again, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I just want to, again, take this time to personally thank you all. And I do this every show, but it just goes to reiterate how appreciative of you all I am. I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day, being an everydayer of the show. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Louisville football has hit the ground running in the portal window already. 2 players visited Monday. 1 will be visiting Tuesday. 2 more on Wednesday and more on Thursday. So we have a lot to talk about on this show. The first player, or the only player visiting on Tuesday, and I might say this name wrong. I haven't been able to find anywhere to provide pronunciation, but it's a safety from Holy Cross University, Jake Jarmolowich, I believe is how you say it, or how I would say it as a PA announcer. Jarmolowich. So Jarmolowich would be my thought. He is from Summit, New Jersey, has played 4 seasons with Holy Cross, with the Crusaders. Actually, technically only 3. I think he was with the team in 2021, but ended up redshirting that year. So he has 1 year of college football remaining to my knowledge. 6'2", 200-pound safety. And I will say, there's not a ton of film on him. Let's look at the statistical numbers. In about 3 years with Holy Cross, he had just under 100 tackles, has 1 forced fumble, had 2 interceptions in 2024. One of those was against Syracuse earlier this year. And like I said, don't really know much about him. When you watch the tape, you can tell why he was an all-conference safety. I mean, the guy flies all over the field, puts his body at risk all the time, just completely, has the length at 6'2". The pursuit it's incredible the way that he is able to, shoot the gaps, be able to defend in coverage, high point the football, read the opposing quarterback. I mean, he's a hard-hitting free safety. And just looking off a tape alone, you can tell that he's a fun player to watch. The only thing about it is that with any player that doesn't come from the Power 4 level, how is insert player here going to translate his skill set to the Power 4 level? And that's something to focus on, because safety is a position of need for the Cardinals after you lose some players in that room. But is this a depth piece that you're looking at? Like, hey, look, we have to fill so many spots. We're going to take a chance on this guy with 1 year remaining because we believe in the skill set. That could be potential. That's something that we just have to wonder moving forward. But the skill looks to be there on tape. But again, it's all about having to scout and see what that trajectory looks like. One of the players that is visiting on Wednesday is linebacker from WKU, Darius Thomas from the South Florida area. We're starting to see that already, right? South Florida recruits, maybe not high school recruits, but yes, high school recruits as well, but transfers from the South Florida area. Ja'Cory Brooks, multiple players that, Corey Thornton, guys from that area transferring to Louisville last cycle. Darius Thomas from that area. He missed all of 2023 with an injury, came back in 2024 and had a really good year for the Hilltoppers, fourth leading tackler. He started all 12 games, had sorry about that. There are delivery trucks making some deliveries to my house for Christmas shopping, and my dog decided to go absolutely berserk, just like Jeff Brohm is doing in the portal. But sorry, that might have been cringe. Just had to relate it anyway. But back to what I was saying, Darius Thomas, 54 tackles this past season for WKU, 12 starts, 7 tackles for loss. He had 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. No interceptions this year, but was actually a safety coming out of high school. Ended up being converted to a linebacker. This is one of his first years playing linebacker. And that's sort of been an MO for some of the linebackers on the Louisville's team over the past couple of years. TJ Quinn was a safety converted to linebacker. Jalen Alderman fit that bill. You had multiple players that sort of Ben Perry. I think that Thomas gives me more Ben Perry vibes. There's not a ton of film to look at, so it was hard to get an idea of the position that he plays. But one of the best linebackers in the Conference USA, being 6'2", 212, my intuition is telling me that he's more of a weak side linebacker, potentially like a star candidate, if you will, that plays the Ben Perry role, potentially the Antonio Watts role. So that's something to focus on, is that if he were to commit, what does Jeff Brohm see him as in this system? So I think more so a weak side linebacker, but I could be wrong. From the highlights that I've seen on Twitter, looks like he hits hard, but then again, I don't have a lot of film on Darius Thomas. So that's something to focus on, is I would like to see, how good he can be. Now, granted, you're seeing some programs seemingly show interest for Darius Thomas, and that's something that Louisville does need, is offensive line help, linebacker help, because, I think that you just have to get to the point to where, you're replacing Ben Perry and potentially TJ Quinn and some other players. So something to keep in mind. The third player, I don't know how to say his first name. I think it's Naeer. I don't really know how to say his first name. Naeer. I think it's Naeer is how I would say it potentially. If I'm saying it incorrectly, obviously forgive me. Naeer Jackson, offensive lineman from Florida International. He is, like Darius Thomas, from the Miami area. Played at, I think, Killian High School, which is where Stanquan played his final season of high school ball, if I'm not mistaken. 6'7", 320 pounds. Those measurables are the type that you see in the SEC. Over 6'6", over 300 pounds. That is a huge human being. He has 24 starts on the interior for Florida International and is not allowed 1 sack. When you watch the film, I was able to go back and get some Florida International film and watch him play. And it's clear that, he has such a huge size advantage, but he uses it well to his advantage. So, this is a guy that I'm like, okay, get this guy committed on his visit, because I do believe that he is a Louisville level talent, and Louisville is replacing some players on the interior, right? Yes, they're bringing back Renato Brown, but Michael Gonzalez, one of the multiple year starters at left guard, one of the key members of this offensive line over the past couple of seasons. You have to find a replacement, and you have a couple of candidates on the roster. You have some candidates. You're going to bring in some players. Maybe Mahamane Moussa is one player to look at, but Jackson, I feel like he's a guy that you could probably potentially pencil in as a starter. 6'7", 320 pounds, hasn't allowed a sack in his career. Now, again, is coming from a non-Power 4 level, so you have to wonder, is he going to be as good against Power 5 competition? I believe that Jackson was born in Philadelphia. That's why his nickname is Big Philly. Born in Philadelphia, and then I believe moved to South Florida. So I was wondering, I was like, why is Big Philly his nickname? And then I realized, well, duh, he was born in Philadelphia. So just something that I thought was pretty interesting. But these are three players that will be on campus over the next day or so. These are the three that I will be looking at to be potentially on commitment watch. Now, granted, not every player that visits campus is going to commit to Louisville, but I do believe that there is a pretty high success rate in that regard. So these are the ones that I would keep an eye out on. But to conclude the show, we're going to dive into the weekly mailbag. A lot of great questions surrounding Michael Brown's visit, the possibility of adding a player here heading into the second semester of the season, who will start at quarterback for Louisville football in the bowl game, and much, much more. Be sure to stay tuned right here on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus score an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, stay 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners can get an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. This week's mailbag questions, I feel like, perfectly summarizes or epitomizes, if you will, the questions that the fan base has been asking over the past couple days, maybe the past week. The first one is, how do you feel about Michael Brown's commitment possibility? Do you think it is going to come before Christmas? It depends on who you ask, because there have been many people and people that I've talked to specifically that have been like, hey, I think that there's going to be a commitment before the end of the holidays. But then some other trusted insiders have said, no, it's still going to be spring or after his basketball season. And I think my take on this is this: regardless of what the commitment timeline is, the longer it goes without Michael Brown deciding, the less and less confident that I'm going to be from an intuition standpoint. Now, does Louisville sit in a good spot right now? Yeah, they're picking up crystal balls left and right. Travis Brandon put in a crystal ball. But if he is indeed, like, let's play the hypothetical. Let's say he's going to wait until spring. And I know that people have said, well, he's ready to commit. If he was ready to commit, he would. If he's waiting till spring, you have a lot of time for other programs to get involved in the recruitment, because one thing remains constant about recruiting is that things change quite often. So, and we've seen this, and unfortunately, this has been like a harsh reality for Louisville fans. It's like, yes, Louisville's in a really good spot, and then the dreaded "things change" statement comes out. And it's the truth. Like, the longer this goes, the more opportunity for more teams to get involved. Like Alabama could get involved. They just missed out on AJ DeBansa, who ended up going to BYU. The rumored NIL package is $7 million. So now the question is $7 million. Obviously, probably not in 1 year, but that's a lot of money. And who's to say that Alabama now won't turn their attention to channeling some of that they had planned? They went toe-to-toe with BYU. Like, they were right there. Who's to say that they won't turn around and use some of that to get in a bidding war with Louisville? Like, as confident as you may be in early December, that doesn't mean you're going to be confident in February or March. So just a heads up is like, yes, things might be looking good right now, but the longer things go without a commitment, the more susceptible things will be to change. So that's all I'm saying. What is the possibility of Louisville adding a player in the second semester to play beginning in January? I mean, I think that they're exhausting all avenues. We know that Louisville is going after some international guys to potentially come in and play. I think that, number one, do you have the NIL, or do you have the money to break those international contracts or buy him out of their contract? And number two, are you going to be able to get him cleared by the NCAA in time? And that's going to definitely be an obstacle that you have to focus on. So I'm not really sure the answer to that question. I think that they're definitely trying to do that. But those players that are being discussed are also being discussed by other schools. So do I think that they'll add a player? My gut is telling me that they won't. Like, they'll get Abubakar Traore back, but they're not going to add a player that's not currently on the team. Would it surprise me if they did? No, because I know that they're trying. But with all the obstacles, with the time against them, I'm just going to say at this point, I don't think it's going to happen. Who will start the bowl game for Louisville at quarterback? I don't think it'll be Tyler Shuck. I think we have seen the final snaps that Tyler Shuck has played here at Louisville, so that would leave, at the moment, Harrison Bailey, Pierce Clarkson, Deuce Adams. I'm going to say Harrison Bailey. Harrison Bailey's been the backup this year. I think that he's going to get the nod at quarterback in this one. I ultimately think that you're going to see the Cardinals rotate quarterbacks in. Just because one player starts it doesn't mean a ton, in my opinion. Like, I think, assuming that those three guys don't leave, I think you're going to see Harrison Bailey at quarterback. I think you're going to see Pierce Clarkson at quarterback. Brady Allen has entered the portal. Deuce Adams. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at the end of the game to maybe see Bullet East star Travis Egan potentially get some run at quarterback for the Cardinals. I think that this is just an opportunity to, number one, see how much you got, at the quarterback spot for Louisville. So just keep an eye out on, number one, making sure that Tyler Shuck doesn't play. I don't think he will. And also to see if anyone else enters the portal before the bowl game. I don't think they will, but you just never know. So, final question. Predict Louisville's record for the remainder of December. Pretty interesting question. Louisville has, I think it's 4 games left in the month. UTEP, Kentucky, Florida State, and Eastern Kentucky. I think they're going to go 3-1. I think that they're going to lose to Kentucky on the road against a top 5 team. Kentucky looks really good. UTEP and EKU, despite having decent records, I think that the Cardinals are better than both of those teams. And then the other team is Florida State. Florida State is currently 7-3. They lost to Florida early in the year. Haven't really picked up a key win outside of that. They've lost to LSU and NC State, both of those by 10 points. I think that Louisville is just a better team than Florida State. Jameer Watkins is a really good guard in the ACC. He's one that I worry about, but still, I think that Louisville's going to go up against a team that doesn't shoot the ball well. I think that Louisville can beat Florida State. So I'm going to say 3-1, which would give Louisville a 8-5 record going into the month of January. So that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back.